it. But I think it's always there. It's just whether you kind of react with that mercy.
Okay. Did the people, other than Joseph, did any of the other people in Egypt do anything to deserve God's mercy in that scenario?
I would say not necessarily that's said that we know from the text,
Okay.
but it's more of it's kind of setting the area for Joseph to succeed, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Because God kind of chose Egypt as a place for him, because what Joseph ultimately says, it was God's plan for him to do all of this,
Okay.
so that people may survive through the famine. And I think it was more so that the Hebrews can come to Egypt, that this is kind of to preserve almost the lineage of what will be in the future.
So could it be that the greater purpose for justice, whether or not the judge delivers punishment or mercy, there's some kind of greater marker than even the individuals? Because for Joseph, everyone was blessed and benefited from his faithfulness, right? So what would you say would be that ultimate goal of extending, of, justice, giving out justice, whether I do it through punishment, whether I do it through mercy? There's seems to be something beyond that. Do you have an idea of what that is? What's the end goal for justice, the purpose? You mentioned goodness, like I had a little note here, but yeah, I don't know, maybe can you talk about that a little bit?
I'm just trying to stay within the text.
Yeah, I know that's hard, because there are so many things that you could pull in.
Yeah,
I think you kind of mentioned it, that it was to save that group of people, the Hebrew people.
Yeah, I think the ultimate was to preserve and save the lineage of the Hebrew, religion, because ultimately that's what's going to set up what the Hebrew religion is really supposed to be and what it's really based around.
Okay.
Especially with the idea of what sin applies to each individual's life and how that can corrupt their life, and how that corrupt nature can be taken away because of the just actions of not only the law but by the provided just actions of God, with that ultimate goal of essentially saving them from what that destruction would be, from the greater evil that sin is.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you.
All right, thank you for the questions. I'll ask a few more questions. Now the audience get ready for their questions. I'd like to, I was impressed, really focused on Joseph, so I want to stick there a little, follow up with Chumley's questions. Why did God allow a faithful servant to go through all the things that Joseph had to go through?
I think, again, this kind of adds to what Ms. Chumley's question was kind of going around, is there was that ultimate goal, but as well as the ultimate goal for the people, but as well as for Joseph as well, is that through all of the bad things that were kind of put on Joseph's life from his family, there's two different sides where you can look at it as almost like a trial to see if this is really the person that can do this for me and set up this religion that I'm trying to accomplish here, as well as the fact is how much of an impact this can cause towards the future in the Hebrew religion. And ultimately what this does is Joseph, although through all of this not necessarily punishment, but all these evil things and going through Egypt and becoming high among with Potiphar and then going to prison and then going with the Pharaoh, is that he ultimately is rewarded for all the good and faithful actions that he does with God, and he never really turns his shoulder. And I think that's to not only give us an example of what I would say a goodly, as said by Potiphar, a goodly man is, as well as a faithful and a good representation of what that faith needs to look like for the Hebrew religion. And again, with that idea of a trial, it really, I think, affirms that this guy is going to help lead this ultimate future or goal.
So you do attribute some of the benefits to Joseph and his faithfulness on him, or are you saying because he was in power he was blessed, or does God just kind of use him throughout to accomplish the end purposes that you've articulated?
I think it is that the true goodness of who Joseph is, as well as God being able to use that from Joseph for his plan, because Joseph himself truly is, you know, a good person and still sees what the good is through all of the evil things that it encompasses him. And I think they kind of work hand in hand together, is that not only was Joseph a really good and faithful person for this type of, just for the person that God needed to be to represent almost the Hebrew religion at the time, because this is, I think at the time, this is really the most good person or example we have from the text of Genesis at this point in time, and which is going to be used for the ultimate good of the Hebrew people. Again, working with God's plan.
Yeah, do you see God manipulating, like my impression of Zeus is that he's a very manipulative and emotional kind of God. Is God of the Bible doing the same thing? It seems like he's kind of raising up people and taking them down and blessing them, and then you even mentioned, of course, this is years later, the plagues came on the very people that seem to be blessed in this time. So why is God doing all this? Is he cruel in a way?
I don't think it's cruel because of what God is doing. I think it's more of a sense that because the ultimate, I think, good that Joseph does receive isn't towards really near the end of his story here, and all of this isn't really necessarily kind of God tricking him into believing that he is a good God and a merciful God. It's more of him kind of, you know, really believing that that's true, and it doesn't have to be a constant reminder of the situation. It's more of, I strongly believe that this is true, so I'm going to base my life and, you know, my future off of this idea that if I stay faithful, even though all of this bad stuff has happened to me, I will essentially be given the gift of what's to come in the future, which is kind of what was told to Jacob, I believe, that what was told to him was by God is kind of through that ultimately the Hebrew religion will kind of reach this point in time where this gift has been given to them.
Okay. So you really personalize it with Joseph. I mean, God and Joseph, there's a relationship there. And I'm just wondering, I think you're probably right. If it was just, you know, God's got to accomplish his plan, and pieces and people are pawns in this whole, you know, a little bit capricious. And again, I wonder if that's just to be able to do all that. Even you mentioned Jacob and his brothers. Yeah, they did some bad things, but they were really penalized with this famine, and they went through a lot of difficult times. Why would he allow the Egyptians to live 7 years of comfort during the famine, but yet have the rest of the world, you know, starve and have to come to Egypt? Why would God allow all that suffering?
To me, this kind of seems like a situation to where it allows for this idea of this. Of course, it's just kind of one man of Joseph, what the Hebrew religion is, but it allows it to kind of spread, especially with the Hebrews being able to come to Egypt amongst the people, allowing the, I guess what I was saying before, allowing an idea of what it is, essentially at first, so that they can get a general concept of how to be part of this, as well as what ultimately can happen through the faith, because we see a faithful man being, you know, strong amongst all of these followers of his own, hand with the Pharaoh, and they're succeeding in life, and really this is what the most faithful man is. And if you set that example for people to see, that might lead them to follow that example, to help create a group of people who can become part of this Hebrew religion instead of just one individual.
Yeah, and also, you know, God created humankind, so he seems to have some care, at least for the Egyptians at this time, you know, before he destroys them, I guess. But, okay, well, those are my questions, and I think you've done a wonderful job with the three of us. Now let's open it up to those in the audience, and we've got some very bright students here, so that might be good. And you can call on
Mr. Aquino.
How well do you know the book of Job?
The book of Job? I've got a decent understanding of the book of Job.
Okay, so my question is
Nobody does.
that my question is, you know how Job was tested or punished randomly by God. Do you think it's just for God to kill innocent children, to ruin his land, to ruin his family and all that, and then to, at the very end, to compensate him, like create a new family, new land, new everything? Do you think it's just to do that?
Good question.
It is, non-textual, because you have to focus on Job here, so I don't know if you can use an example from the text that you studied and prepared for.
And caveat that with, the whole point of the book of Job is that nobody understands the book of Job. That's like that. So, go ahead.
Where do I start here? Let's see. Because I don't have the text in front of me, I'm just kind of make some assumptions here that there's reason to everything that he does, which we do see in the book of Genesis, is that he has an ultimate reason for his cause, which is one of the things I talked about in my essay, which I know you don't have in front of you, is that there's reason before, with punishment, and those two work together, is that you need an equivalent reason to punish the person for that reason. It can't be overdone or underdone for it to be considered just. And again, I don't have Job, so I'm sure there's something in there, but it's kind of there's an ultimate reason, I would say, and just knowing what that reason is, you can kind of see whether it's just or unjust.
Just because Satan said, "Can I?"
Yeah, there's that part of the story.
And God said, sure.
Anybody else first?
Sticking to the text.
It's not a text, but like, I want to ask, do you think, well, for your definition of just, or justice, whatever you want to call it, do you think that just can be used for reasonable or good and bad?
Sorry, can you say that one more time?
Do you think just can be used as like a reasonable punishment, or can it be used for good and bad?
The idea of what just is for a reason for punishment, is that what you're saying? I don't think so. I think that ultimate factor of whether it's just or unjust comes after the punishment, and good and bad, the definition of what good and bad is what helps judgment of either the God or the system that's considered just, because there's a difference between justice and divine justice, just especially the fact of the creator and then a godly figure. That's what I kind of see the difference of those two, which is in this situation what God is. But if you're just looking at justice in general, it's more of what a definition of what good is. It's a mutual thing that can affect positively of the person doing the person doing the thing that receives that punishment, as well as the person giving that punishment to the thing. It's what's good for them and for the people. So if you do something bad, it's cool. You see nowadays with our justice system, it's more of a correction type deal. You serve this time or you do this punishment for your act to ultimately try to change that of that bad thing you did, to maybe even ultimately put a good thing for the wrongdoer as well as the people around him.
Are you saying that God's justice is that or not?
It's a little different, I think, with God, because of that idea of what divine justice is. I just that adds a couple more things to it, especially with the Hebrew God, for example, because him creating the human, race, it gives him some sort of authority over them. But for the idea of what's just and unjust, I think there's that set standard that can't change. That needs to be, at least of course that was created by God, that set standard that needs to be applied.
So when you think of justice, do you think when God was creating his creation, that he was writing this list of things that he should make, and all of a sudden on the list there was this thing called justice? Or do you think justice came about to solve a specific need?
I think I'm more towards that second thing you had said, because in order for him to have, of course it didn't happen, a perfect creation or something that can follow in what he sees as, you can kind of the closest to what a good person is and what the good is, and the closer you can get to that is based off of situation. And I think that's what kind of you were going with that, is that justice exists for situations that counter what his idea or plan is, which we do see with the tempter, Satan, is kind of that counter thing that goes against his ultimate plan. And with the idea of justice, it helps protect his plan in a sense, as well as apply things that can help correct that situation.
Good answer.
Okay.
That's safe.
Earlier you mentioned, when referring to justice, that there was a sort of spectrum, specifically with over-punishing and then mercy. And I think you said that Zeus somehow falls on both ends of the spectrum, or maybe, I remember you said, over-punishing. I'm not sure what the other end of the
So I said there was kind of, we have the just system right in the middle, and we have this over-punishment, which leads to either over-punishing someone innocent or under-punishing someone who is guilty. And then there is a side of, I would say, negligence, to where you just ignore the fact that you have a responsibility to enforce these laws for the people or the gods, which what I was saying is what Zeus applies for, because there's a situation where he over-punishes some people. For example, we have an example of Io in the book of Prometheus, who receives all this punishment all over essentially a dream that she has, that she was to be married to Zeus, and she didn't want this dream to happen when she had brought it up to Zeus to kind of elaborate on this dream, and she said she wanted this, but he ultimately turns her into a cow, and then turns himself into a bull and takes advantage over Io, to put it lightly. And then for the other side, he essentially was saying that for the human race on Earth, he ultimately didn't want anything to do with them. Kind of said that not only do they deserve to be ruled over, but they were almost like ants to him, that they deserve no purpose. If that answers your question.
Yeah, that does.
Are those two faults related?
Negligence and over-punishment. I think they can be, again, based off of the situation. Like, you can be negligent and over-punishment someone simply because of the fact that you felt like it, or you didn't truly use the justice system of how it applies to the situation. So it can work both ways.
Mr. Pillsbury used the word capricious earlier, which I think is what you're just describing.
You did better.
You brought up this topic of deserving justice and deserving mercy. What does it mean to deserve mercy?
I don't know if it's necessarily deserving mercy, because the people didn't deserve to receive mercy from God because of their own, I want to say, their own self-foolishness. But for justice, I think justice is more, if you want to put the title deserving in front of that, that's more applicable to justice. Because whether you do a good thing, you deserve justice to be done in a sense that you don't get punished for something you didn't do. But with mercy, it's more of a, it's like you don't deserve the mercy, but I'm going to give it to you anyways.
So you can deserve justice, and justice being, you get what you deserve, whether that's punishment or if you're innocent, you don't get punishment, right? So if you're not getting what you deserve, which is, I would say, mercy, or I would say, is mercy unjust?
It's not unjust, because if it depends on how you look at it. Like, for example, in a court of law, that can be considered unjust if you're guilty for something. But it kind of depends on the situation. If you're guilty and you keep pursuing that way of life of being guilty and doing bad things, that would ultimately be considered unjust. But if you were to do the guilty thing, you receive the mercy of God, and then based off of that mercy, you were able to use that as an influence in your own life and kind of flip the scenario to where you change your life from doing the wrong things that you had done before and ultimately start doing what's considered good. That's what essentially I think the mercy is for, is so that it can change that path. Instead of walking away, you can walk towards the faith, towards the Hebrew religion.
So either way, the lesson of the punishment versus the mercy, either way the lesson's taught, is that what you're saying? Okay.
Okay. Couple more questions.
So what you're saying is that justice is dealt out according to what the law was and who's giving the sentence, and it's deserved. And mercy then is just subjective, depending on the sentence, or I should say the crime, or what had happened and why they were being accused.
I would say no matter what the wrongdoing was, that option for mercy is there. It's just how you interact with that mercy is whether you refuse it and you keep doing the bad things and you keep doing that crime that you had done before, whether it's, you know, a crime in our system or it's a crime against God. And then there's the other idea, you can do any sort of crime, but if you accept that mercy and really feel sorry for that crime and then become faithful and have a love towards God, you can have the flip change of sides. And the change of things is, although occasionally that punishment is still in effect, that mercy is there so that you can, although through that punishment you can learn from it and then ultimately, you know, go with God's plan.
So the person dealing out the justice, it's up to them to see how much mercy they're going to give the person who committed that crime?
I think in the sense with divine justice, with the idea of God, but with the normal justice system, that would be a little different because that's just more punishment and more of not the sense of mercy, but more of the sense of, are you going to get what you deserve, whether you did something good or bad?
Well, unfortunately, at this time we are at our maybe not so unfortunately. Let's give a round of applause. At this time, the panel is going to discuss if you passed or not. So we're going to have everyone leave at this point, and you can congratulate him outside for the job well done. And then we're just going to have you back in to talk to him. Thank you all.